Welcome back to All Levels English Podcast. I'm Sarah, and I'm here with my co-host Michael. This is episode 2, and we're so excited to continue this journey with you. If you missed our first episode about building a daily English learning routine, make sure to go back and check it out. Today, we're diving into something that I personally believe is one of the most powerful tools for English learners: listening and shadowing techniques.
Hey everyone! Great to be back with you, Sarah. After our first episode, we received so many messages from listeners asking about specific techniques to improve their listening skills. And honestly, that's not surprising because listening is often the skill that English learners struggle with the most. It's one thing to read English or even write it, but when native speakers talk at natural speed with contractions, idioms, and various accents, it can feel overwhelming.
Absolutely, Michael. And that's exactly why we chose this topic for today. Listening isn't just about understanding what someone says, it's about training your brain to process English in real time, which is crucial for fluent communication. But before we dive deep into techniques, let's talk about why listening is so challenging for English learners. Michael, what do you think are the main obstacles people face?
Well, there are several factors at play here. First, there's the speed issue we mentioned. Native speakers don't pause between words the way we do in textbooks. Words blend together, sounds change, and we use a lot of connected speech. For example, want to becomes wanna, going to becomes gonna, and did you sounds like diddy. These aren't mistakes, they're natural features of spoken English that learners need to get used to.
That's such a crucial point. And then there's the vocabulary challenge. Even if you know a word when you see it written, recognizing it in spoken form, especially within the flow of natural speech, is a completely different skill. Plus, there are cultural references, slang expressions, and context-dependent meanings that can throw learners off track.
Exactly. And let's not forget about different accents and dialects. English is spoken all over the world, and it sounds different everywhere. A learner might be comfortable with American English pronunciation, but struggle to understand a British, Australian, or even different regional American accent. This variety can be both exciting and challenging.
But here's the thing, and this is what I want our listeners to remember: these challenges are not insurmountable. In fact, they're completely normal, and every successful English speaker has faced them. The key is having the right approach and techniques to overcome them. And that's where listening practice and shadowing come in.
So let's start with listening practice. When we talk about effective listening practice, we're not talking about just putting on an English video in the background while you do other things. That's passive listening, and while it might help you get used to the sounds of English, it won't significantly improve your comprehension skills.
Right. Active listening is what we need to focus on. This means giving your full attention to the audio, trying to understand not just individual words but the overall meaning, the speaker's tone, and the context. It's like the difference between hearing music playing in a store versus sitting down and really listening to your favorite song with headphones on.
Great analogy. Now let's talk about different types of listening practice. The first type is intensive listening. This is when you choose shorter pieces of audio, maybe 5 minutes long, and you really focus on understanding every detail. You might listen to the same clip multiple times, pause to think about what you heard, and even look up words you don't understand.
I love intensive listening because it's like putting your listening skills under a microscope. You're training your ear to catch those subtle details, the way words connect, and the rhythm of English speech. For beginners, I'd recommend starting with simple dialogues or short news clips. For more advanced learners, try podcast segments or interviews.
The second type is extensive listening, which is more about quantity than intense analysis. Here, you're listening to longer content, maybe 15-30 minutes or more, and focusing on general comprehension rather than every single word. The goal is to get comfortable with the flow of English and to build your listening stamina.
This is where you might watch an entire episode of a TV show, listen to a podcast, or attend an online lecture. Don't worry if you don't catch everything. The point is to expose yourself to natural English for extended periods. Your brain starts to recognize patterns and common phrases, even if you're not consciously aware of it.
Now let's get to one of my favorite techniques, shadowing. Sarah, you mentioned this is something you're particularly passionate about. Can you explain what shadowing is for our listeners who might not be familiar with it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Shadowing is an incredibly powerful technique that combines listening with speaking practice. Basically, you listen to a piece of audio and try to repeat what you hear at the same time, or just slightly behind, the speaker. You're like their shadow, hence the name.
It sounds simple, but it's actually quite challenging, especially when you first start. Your brain is processing the incoming audio while simultaneously trying to reproduce the sounds. It's like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time. It requires coordination and practice.
But that's exactly why it's so effective. When you shadow, you're training multiple skills simultaneously. You're improving your listening comprehension, your pronunciation, your rhythm and intonation, and your fluency all at once. It's like the ultimate multitasking workout for your English skills.
Let's break down the benefits of shadowing in more detail. First, pronunciation improvement. When you shadow, you're mimicking native speakers' mouth movements, stress patterns, and intonation. This helps you develop a more natural-sounding accent and rhythm.
Second, it improves your listening skills because you have to listen very carefully to be able to repeat what you hear. You can't just zone out, you need to be fully engaged with the audio. This trains your brain to process English more quickly and accurately.
Third, shadowing helps with fluency. Because you're speaking along with the audio, you're practicing speaking at a natural pace. This helps reduce hesitation and builds your confidence in maintaining conversational speed.
And fourth, it's great for learning natural speech patterns. You pick up on how native speakers actually talk. The contractions, the linking sounds, the stress patterns that make English sound natural rather than robotic.
So how do you actually do shadowing effectively? Let's walk through the process step by step. First, choose appropriate material. For beginners, I'd recommend starting with slower, clearer speech, maybe educational videos, audiobooks, or language learning podcasts.
The content should be at or slightly below your current level. If you're spending all your mental energy just trying to understand the words, you won't have enough cognitive resources left for the shadowing itself. Comprehensible input is key here.
Once you've chosen your material, start with what I call mumble shadowing. Don't worry about pronouncing every word perfectly. Just follow along with the general rhythm and melody of the speech, even if you're just making sounds that approximate what you hear.
This is such an important point, Michael. A lot of learners get frustrated because they think they need to shadow perfectly from the beginning. But even professional interpreters, who use shadowing as a training technique, don't start with perfect shadowing. It's a skill that develops over time.
Exactly. After you're comfortable with mumble shadowing, move to word-level shadowing. Try to repeat actual words, but don't pause the audio if you miss something. Keep going with the flow of the speech. Missing words is normal and part of the process.
Then there's phrase-level shadowing, where you focus on catching and repeating meaningful chunks of language rather than individual words. This is where shadowing becomes really powerful for fluency development, because you're practicing how ideas flow together in English.
The most advanced level is full shadowing, where you're repeating everything clearly and accurately while maintaining the natural pace and intonation of the original speaker. This is challenging even for advanced learners, so don't expect to reach this level immediately.
Now, let's talk about different types of shadowing. There's complete shadowing, which we've been discussing, where you repeat everything you hear. But there's also selective shadowing, where you focus on specific elements like just the stressed words, or just the content words, or just the function words.
Selective shadowing can be really useful for targeting specific areas of difficulty. For example, if you struggle with English rhythm, you might shadow just the stressed syllables. If you have trouble with grammar words like articles and prepositions, you might focus on shadowing those specifically.
There's also delayed shadowing, where you wait a few seconds before repeating what you heard. This is more like interpretation practice and can be helpful for developing your short-term memory and processing skills.
Let's talk about the technical aspects of setting up your shadowing practice. First, you need good audio equipment. Headphones are really important because they allow you to hear the audio clearly while still being able to hear your own voice.
I recommend over-ear headphones rather than earbuds if possible, because they provide better sound isolation. You want to be able to hear both the original audio and your own voice clearly so you can compare them.
You also want to be able to control the playback easily. Some people like to use apps that allow them to slow down audio without changing the pitch, especially when they're starting out. This can make shadowing more manageable for beginners.
Recording yourself while shadowing can be incredibly valuable too. You can compare your version with the original and identify areas where you need improvement. It's like having instant feedback on your pronunciation and rhythm.
Now let's address some common challenges people face with shadowing. The first one is feeling overwhelmed. When you start shadowing, your brain is working overtime, and it's common to feel mentally exhausted after just a few minutes.
This is completely normal. Start with very short sessions, maybe just 30 seconds to a minute, and gradually increase the duration. Think of it like physical exercise. You wouldn't expect to run a marathon on your first day of training.
Another common issue is perfectionism. People get frustrated when they can't shadow perfectly and give up. But remember, the goal isn't perfect reproduction, it's improvement over time. Even native speakers would struggle to shadow perfectly on their first try.
I always tell my students to embrace the messiness of learning. Every time you practice shadowing, even if it feels chaotic, your brain is making neural connections that will serve you in the future. Progress in language learning often happens below the surface before it becomes visible.
Let's talk about choosing the right materials for shadowing. The variety of content available today is incredible. Podcasts, YouTube videos, audiobooks, news broadcasts, movies, TV shows. The key is matching the material to your goals and level.
For pronunciation work, I love using audiobooks because the narration is usually very clear and well-paced. News broadcasts are great for learning formal English and expanding vocabulary. Podcasts are fantastic for natural, conversational English.
TV shows and movies can be excellent too, but choose carefully. Comedies might have a lot of cultural references that could be confusing. Dramas often have more predictable language patterns. And don't overlook children's content, it's often perfectly paced for language learners.
Here's a pro tip. Use content you're already familiar with in your native language. If you've seen a movie before or read a book, you'll have context that helps you understand even when your listening skills fail you. This reduces cognitive load and makes shadowing more manageable.
Let's discuss how to integrate listening and shadowing into your daily routine, building on what we talked about in our first episode about creating sustainable habits. The key is to start small and be consistent rather than trying to do marathon sessions occasionally.
I recommend the 15-15-15 approach for beginners. Spend 15 minutes on intensive listening, 15 minutes on extensive listening, and 15 minutes on shadowing practice each day. That's less than an hour total, but it's incredibly effective when done consistently.
You can also incorporate listening practice into activities you're already doing. Listen to English podcasts while commuting, watch English YouTube videos during lunch breaks, or do shadowing practice while walking. Multitasking can be effective as long as you're still giving adequate attention to the language.
But be careful not to make everything background noise. You need focused practice time too. I like to think of it as having both your English gym time, where you're actively working out your skills, and your English lifestyle, where English is naturally integrated into your day.
Let's talk about tracking progress with listening and shadowing. Unlike vocabulary or grammar, listening improvement can be hard to measure objectively. But there are ways to monitor your development.
Keep a listening journal. Note what you listened to, how much you understood, and any new words or phrases you learned. Over time, you'll be able to see patterns in your improvement. You might notice that you're understanding longer segments, catching more details, or feeling less mentally fatigued.
Recording yourself shadowing the same piece of content at different points in time is incredibly revealing. You'll be amazed at how much your pronunciation, rhythm, and fluency improve, even if the progress feels slow day by day.
Another way to track progress is through comprehension challenges. Pick a podcast episode or video that's slightly above your level and listen to it once a month. Keep notes on how much you understand each time. You'll likely see steady improvement in your comprehension rate.
Now let's address different learning styles and how they relate to listening practice. If you're a visual learner, you might find it helpful to use subtitles or transcripts alongside your listening practice, at least initially.
But be careful not to become dependent on visual aids. The goal is to understand spoken English without reading support. I recommend a gradual weaning process. Start with subtitles, then move to subtitle-free listening, then to audio-only content.
For kinesthetic learners, shadowing is perfect because it involves physical movement. Your mouth, your breathing, your whole body is engaged in the learning process. You might also benefit from walking while listening or using gestures to help remember new phrases.
Auditory learners often excel at listening practice, but they still need structured approaches to maximize their natural advantages. Focus on the musical aspects of English, the rhythm, stress, and intonation patterns that make the language flow.
Let's discuss the role of different English accents in listening practice. This is something many learners worry about, but I think it's actually an opportunity rather than a problem.
Absolutely. English is a global language, and you're going to encounter different accents throughout your English-speaking journey. Rather than trying to avoid this diversity, embrace it as part of becoming a well-rounded English user.
Start with one accent that you're comfortable with, maybe American or British English, and build your confidence there. Once you're solid with that, gradually expose yourself to other varieties. Australian, Canadian, South African, Indian English, each has its own beauty and characteristics.
The fascinating thing is that the core listening skills you develop with one accent transfer to others. Once your brain gets good at processing English speech patterns, it adapts more easily to variations.
Let's talk about using technology to enhance your listening and shadowing practice. There are some incredible apps and tools available today that didn't exist even a few years ago.
Speed adjustment tools are game changers. Many apps allow you to slow down audio without making it sound unnatural. This is perfect for shadowing practice. You can start slow and gradually increase to normal speed.
Repetition features are great too. Some apps let you loop specific segments of audio automatically, so you can practice the same phrase or sentence multiple times without manually rewinding.
Don't forget about AI-powered pronunciation tools that can give you feedback on your shadowing attempts. While they're not perfect, they can provide objective data about your pronunciation accuracy.
But remember, technology should supplement, not replace, human interaction. Try to find opportunities to practice listening with real people, whether through conversation exchanges, online tutoring, or English-speaking communities.
Speaking of real interaction, let's talk about how listening and shadowing practice prepares you for actual conversations. When you've trained your ear through intensive listening practice, you'll find that understanding native speakers in real conversations becomes much easier.
And when you've practiced shadowing, your own speech becomes more natural and fluent. You've trained your mouth to produce English sounds quickly and accurately, which reduces the hesitation and awkwardness that many learners experience in conversations.
This is why I'm such a big advocate for these techniques. They bridge the gap between passive language knowledge and active communication skills. You're not just learning about English, you're learning to use English.
Let's discuss some advanced listening and shadowing techniques for our more experienced listeners. One technique is called /listening, where you listen for specific grammatical structures or vocabulary themes.
For example, you might listen to a podcast episode and focus only on identifying all the past tense verbs, or all the transition phrases, or all the idiomatic expressions. This kind of targeted listening helps you notice language patterns more consciously.
Another advanced technique is prediction shadowing. Before you listen to a segment, try to predict what vocabulary or structures might appear based on the topic. Then shadow the content and see how accurate your predictions were.
There's also emotion shadowing, where you focus not just on the words, but on mimicking the speaker's emotional tone, emphasis, and attitude. This is fantastic for developing more expressive and natural-sounding speech.
For really advanced learners, try simultaneous interpretation practice. This is where you listen to content in English and try to summarize or paraphrase what you hear in real time. It's incredibly challenging but excellent for developing high-level processing skills.
Now, let's address some common myths and misconceptions about listening practice. One myth is that you need to understand every single word to be successful at listening.
This is so far from the truth. Native speakers don't catch every word in natural conversation either. The goal is to understand the main ideas and key information, not to decode every syllable.
Another myth is that listening to English while sleeping will improve your skills. While there might be some very minimal benefits to sound exposure, you can't learn actively while unconscious. Effective listening requires conscious attention and engagement.
Some people also believe that faster exposure automatically leads to better skills. But just like physical exercise, the right intensity is more important than maximum intensity. Challenging yourself is good, but overwhelming yourself is counterproductive.
Let's talk about the emotional aspects of listening practice, because this is often overlooked. Listening can be frustrating, especially in the beginning when you're missing a lot of information.
It's important to develop emotional resilience and patience with the process. Language learning is not linear, you'll have good days and challenging days. The key is to maintain consistent practice even when progress feels slow.
Celebrate small victories. Maybe today you caught a joke that would have gone over your head last month, or you understood a fast-talking YouTuber for the first time. These moments of success fuel motivation for continued practice.
Building confidence through listening success is crucial for overall English development. When you know you can understand English audio, you approach conversations and other listening situations with less anxiety and more openness.
Let's discuss how listening and shadowing practice fits into a comprehensive English learning program. These skills shouldn't exist in isolation. They should support and reinforce your other language development activities.
For example, vocabulary you encounter during listening practice should be reviewed and integrated into your speaking and writing. Grammar patterns you notice while shadowing should be consciously practiced in other contexts.
Reading and listening should complement each other too. Try reading transcripts of content you've listened to, or listen to audio versions of texts you've read. This multimodal exposure strengthens your overall language network.
Writing practice can benefit from listening too. Pay attention to how native speakers organize their ideas, use transitions, and structure their arguments. These patterns can inform your own writing style.
As we start to wrap up today's episode, let's give our listeners some concrete action steps they can take immediately after listening to this podcast.
First, choose one piece of English audio content that interests you, maybe a YouTube video, podcast episode, or audiobook chapter, and commit to intensive listening practice with it this week. Listen to the same 3-5-minute segment multiple times, focusing on understanding more with each repetition.
Second, try your first shadowing session. Pick something simple, maybe a short dialogue from a language learning video or a slow-paced news report. Remember, it's okay to start with Mumble shadowing. The goal is to begin developing the skill.
Third, set up a simple system for tracking your listening practice. It could be as basic as a notebook where you record what you listened to and your comprehension level, or as sophisticated as a spreadsheet with detailed metrics.
And finally, be patient with yourself. Listening skills take time to develop, and everyone progresses at their own pace. Focus on consistency rather than perfection, and trust that regular practice will lead to improvement.
Before we go, let's remind our listeners that listening and shadowing are just two tools in the language learning toolkit. They're powerful tools, but they work best when combined with other forms of practice and study.
Don't neglect speaking practice with real people, reading for vocabulary development, writing for grammar reinforcement, and formal study of language rules and patterns. A balanced approach is always most effective.
We also want to encourage our listeners to experiment and find what works best for them. Maybe you discover that you prefer shadowing with music rather than speech, or that you learn best from certain types of content. Personal customization is key to sustainable practice.
Remember, becoming proficient at understanding and using English is not just about academic achievement. It opens doors to new relationships, career opportunities, cultural experiences, and ways of thinking about the world.
Every hour you spend practicing listening and shadowing is an investment in your future self. You're building skills that will serve you for decades to come, whether you're giving presentations, enjoying entertainment, building friendships, or pursuing your dreams.
We're so grateful to all our listeners for joining us on this journey. Your enthusiasm and commitment to improving your English inspire us to keep creating content that we hope serves you well.
If you found today's episode helpful, please consider sharing it with other English learners in your life. Word of mouth recommendations mean so much to podcasters like us, and you might help someone discover techniques that change their language learning journey.
And don't forget to practice what we've discussed. The most beautiful theory in the world won't help you if you don't put it into action. Start small, be consistent, and trust the process.
That's all for episode 2 of All Levels English Podcast. We hope you found our discussion of listening and shadowing techniques helpful and inspiring. Remember, fluency is built one conversation, one listening session, one shadowing practice at a time.
Join us next time as we continue exploring effective English learning strategies together. Until then, keep listening, keep practicing, and keep believing in your ability to master this beautiful language. See you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.